going to take a look at simplifying a couple of square roots, or a couple of radicals. But in this case, we're going to look at some where there are coefficients on the outside. So for example, negative 2 times the square root of 40. So the first thing to know is this is a coefficient that is just being multiplied by the square root of 40. So what we want to do is simplify that square root of 40 part if we can. So you might want to draw a little line or something, just split those up so you can focus on the square root of 40 on its own. So what perfect square goes into 40? Well, 4 times 10 is 40. So we're going to rewrite 40 as 4 times 10 and bring down that negative 2. Then we can go ahead and split up this radical as square root 4 and square root 10, bring down that negative 2. And then we can actually take the square root of 4 and we get 2 from that. Bring down that square root of 10 because that won't give us a whole number. And we have this negative 2 being brought down, and that's being multiplied. So really in the end what we have is negative 4 as our coefficient, square root of 10. Since no other perfect squares go into that 10, that is the simplified form. Let's take a look at some where we have some variables. So let's see the square root of x squared. Well, what that is asking for is what times itself is x squared. And the answer to that is just plain x. So the square root of x squared is x. What about the square root of x to the fourth? What times itself gives you x to the fourth? Well, that would be x squared, since x squared times x squared is x to the fourth. What about x to the 10? Well, x to the fifth times x to the fifth would give you x to the 10, so the square root is x to the fifth. What I want you to see here is that the powers that are in the square roots are being divided by 2. So that was a second power in the square root, and it got rewritten as a first power out of a square root. That was a fourth power in a square root, got rewritten to a second power in a square root. 10th power became a fifth power. So all those powers got divided by 2. So what about if you have an odd power, like x to the 7? Well, we are still dividing that by 2, but you don't get just a whole number from that. Think way back to when you did long division and you took a number and you divided. So let's take 7 and divide it by 2. Well, 2 goes into 7 3 times, and that would give you 6, so we're subtracting 6. And we're left with 1, and that 2 does not go into 1, so that means we have a remainder. So what we have when we divided this by 2 is we have 3 remainder 1. So when you divided this power by 2, we had 3 as a whole number. So we have x to the third on the outside of a radical, but we have a remainder on the inside. So anytime you're dividing and you get a remainder, you're going to have that power still left over on the inside. A third root works pretty much the same way. So if we had, let's say we were taking the third root of x to the 8, well, this is a third root. That's going to be dividing powers by 3. So if we take 8, the power, and divide it by 3, that goes in twice, gives us 6, and we have a remainder of 2. So 8 divided by 3 is 2 remainder 2. So we have a power of 2 on the outside, but we have a power of 2 remaining in on the inside. So that would simplify to x squared cube root of x squared. Alright, let's kind of pull all these ideas together and let's take a look at the square root of, I don't know, let's say 60x to the fifth. Now that 60 is not being divided by 2 because that's not a power, so we're going to break that one down into perfect squares. So what perfect square goes into 60? Well, 4 goes into 60, so 4 times 15, and I'm going to leave that as x to the fifth right now. We can go ahead and split up all of these three things are being multiplied, so square root 4, square root 15, square root x to the fifth, and then we'll simplify each individually. The square root of 4 is 2, square root of 15 will stay square root of 15, and this one has a remainder, so we're going to have x, let's see, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5, so 2 remainder 1, so we have a power of 2, and there's still an x left over. Now these things are on the outside, so we can bring those together as 2x squared, and those numbers are left on the inside, so we can bring those back together as one radical. So 2x squared times square root of 15x.